Hi everyone, my name is Dylan, and this video is my reflection on my experience with exercise counseling this semester in HES 231. This reflection is based on 2 interviews that I previously conducted with my partners, John and Psychus, and the first interview being without, and the second one being with, practiced exercise counseling techniques and communication strategies that were discussed in lecture. The point of the second interview was just to practice concepts that we went over in class alongside reflect on the progression of my own communication and counseling skills. At the start of the semester, so in the first video or first interview, it's evident that I'm not confident in my approach to exercise counseling. I wasn't sure what sort of questions I should be asking and sort of how to even go about interviewing someone. I knew that the ultimate goal of exercise counseling was to help my client explore their exercise behaviors, but I wasn't sure how to guide that conversation in a way that felt natural and supportive. Because of that, my first session was at the very least shaky. I was thinking a lot about what question I should be asking next and whether or not I was asking the right questions. But now looking back, I realized that exercise counseling is less about asking the perfect questions and more about building rapport, listening actively, and helping your client explore their own motivations for change. Over the course of the semester, I became more comfortable with the process of counseling, and I started to understand that my role was not to be an expert, but to support my client in reflecting on their own experiences and goals. In this reflection, I'm basically going to be discussing my personal progression, the counseling skills that I developed, and how this will influence my interactions in the future, both personally and professionally. So during the first session with John, I noticed that one of my biggest challenges was about how to start and maintain the conversation. I didn't really know what to ask initially, so I'd come in with a series of questions that I was prepared to ask, and as a result, the conversation felt more forced and less natural. There were times where I felt like I needed to just move forward with the interview, and I didn't really engage with what John was saying. Another thing I noticed was that I was initially uncomfortable with pauses in the conversation. Whenever there was a moment of silence, I quickly rushed to fill it with another question, or I would just try to move on with my interview. But as the semester progressed, and we learned more about exercise counseling, I learned that pauses are actually an important part of communication, and they allow the client to reflect on their responses. So during the second session, I was much more comfortable with allowing these pauses rather than rushing to fill them in with another question. Another improvement I noticed was a major improvement in my confidence. During the first session, I didn't really know anything about exercise counseling, so I was really worried about whether or not I was doing it correctly. But during the second session, I was much more relaxed and focused on actually listening to my client and engaging in a conversation rather than worrying about my own performance. Another thing I noticed was a change in how I actually approached the sessions themselves. Rather than looking at it like a structured interview where I just ask a series of questions and get some answers, I started to look at it more as a conversation where the client and I explore ideas. This kind of led to a more collaborative session rather than a structured interview, which was kind of what the first session looked like. So I'd say over the course of the semester, my progression involved becoming more confident, becoming more comfortable with the overall process, alongside becoming more comfortable with allowing pauses, and becoming more comfortable with actively listening to my client and engaging in the conversation, as well as an awareness of how my communication style could influence the conversation. So one of the most important skills that I developed during this class was the ability to effectively ask open-ended questions. Initially, I asked a whole lot of closed-ended questions, especially during that first interview, direct questions, which basically allowed the client, specifically John, to answer without providing much detail. Open-ended questions encourage the client to share more about their experiences, as well as their challenges and motivations. So I switched from asking questions like, do you exercise regularly, to questions more aligned with what sort of factors influence how often you exercise during the week, or what does your regular exercise routine look like? Asking open-ended questions allowed Psychus to share more about his exercise experience during the second interview, which kind of made that conversation a whole lot more meaningful than the first interview. Another important skill that I learned about was reflective listening, which involves paraphrasing and summarizing what the client said to sort of just demonstrate your understanding of their perspective. So instead of immediately asking another question, I would try to summarize and repeat back what the client stated back to them. So for example, during the second interview, if Psychus had mentioned something about having a very busy schedule or a lot of classes, sleep schedule, I would just repeat back to him that it sounds like you have a very busy schedule, which could make it hard to fit physical activity into that week. Using reflective listening or using these reflections helped me demonstrate that I was actually actively listening and engaging with what he was saying and actually paying attention to what he was saying. I also learned about the importance of affirmations. Affirmations focus on recognizing strengths and efforts rather than judging performance. During the second session, when Psychus mentioned something positive about his habits or goals, I would sort of highlight that strength. So for example, if he mentioned, or when he mentioned that he wants to improve his fitness and that he's already tried, I really recognized and highlighted that motivation and effort that he's already put forward. On top of that, I also learned about the importance of avoiding the expert trap. So initially in the semester, I immediately wanted to provide advice and suggestions when the client described a challenge that they were facing. I felt like at that time, I felt like the best way to help was to provide solutions. But I quickly learned that immediately providing suggestions and advice can actually create a power imbalance, which makes the client feel less involved in the overall decision-making process. So instead of kind of just telling the client what they should do, I instead tried to guide the conversation so that they could discover their own ideas and strategies. So for example, instead of providing a specific workout routine, I might ask, what activities do you regularly enjoy participating in? And what activities do you think would fit into your schedule realistically? And this approach kind of just made the overall session or second session feel much more collaborative and gave Psychus more of a feeling of ownership over his own goals. I also learned about the importance of the principles of motivational interviewing, which include compassion, acceptance, partnership, and evocation. So the principles kind of just emphasize the counselor's role in supporting the client and finding their own motivation rather than trying to persuade them. So I used these principles specifically to create an environment where Psychus could feel more comfortable sharing his thoughts and ideas during the second interview. I also became more aware of moments of change talk when Psychus during the second interview would mention any sort of interest in becoming more physically fit or becoming more active rather. And when this happened, I tried to just highlight and reinforce those ideas just to strengthen his motivation. So overall, counseling techniques, or learning about these counseling techniques have helped me become a better communicator and have allowed the sessions to feel more natural and productive. So these counseling skills will be very valuable in my future career and personal life. Some specific careers where they could prove to be beneficial include careers in healthcare, coaching, or really any career that has to do with working with people or promoting behavioral change. One specific skill that stuck out to me was the ability to actively listen. In the professional setting, many people are quick to provide solutions without fully understanding the situation. And this course showed me the importance of listening carefully and showing empathy rather than just providing solutions, and that listening carefully and showing empathy can actually be more productive and more efficient than just simply providing solutions. Another skill that stuck out to me was the ability to build rapport. Just being able to establish trust and make people feel comfortable is essential in many professions, especially those that involve working with people. When it comes to interactions with clients, colleagues, or patients, that ability to build rapport would allow me to create stronger relationships and hold more productive conversations. I also think the idea of avoiding the expert trap will prove to be useful in many areas of my life. So instead of assuming that I know the best solution for someone's problems, I can support them in exploring their own ideas and goals. And this approach encourages independence and will help people feel more confident in their own decisions. But beyond just my professional career, these skills will also benefit me in my personal life and my everyday interactions. So learning how to communicate effectively, listen actively, and show empathy can also improve my relationship with family, friends, and just other people who I happen to meet. So overall, these counseling skills are transferable skills that will just continue to benefit me in many different ways and in many areas of my life. And that's it for my reflection. Thank you for listening.